but if you have any questions. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Anthony Epp. I am the producer and production manager for Pickled Rabbit. That's a short film that was written by Julie Zhu and Joshua Bateman and directed by Julie Zhu. And we are currently running a crowdfunding campaign for post production to raise funds for post production. But we've shot the film. The film's in the can, and we're just putting some cash together to try to finish post production. And we've got, I think, 7 days left in our campaign. So that's kind of just a premise for the for this. And I'm here to answer any questions you have about making films, producing, experiences on Pickled Rabbit. Anything else, life questions? Although maybe you can give me some life advice. Go ahead and ask any questions if you've got any. I've entered in the link if you wanted to check out the campaign. So one of the first questions that I got today that I'll answer right now. What inspired you to take on the role of production manager for this short film? I'll try to give this. I never give short answers, so I'll give a longer answer. We worked with Josh and Julie, my Helena, my partner, and my wife. We have worked with them on a couple of movies together. They were the script supervisors on a couple of films that we have worked on as assistant directors. And they wrote this really cool, fun script for Pickled Rabbit called Pickled Rabbit. And they were going to try to raise some funding for the film last year. And they asked us, because we have been getting into producing films more lately, to come and help put the logistics of the project together. And as is always on short films, it's really a fun opportunity to tell a story in a very condensed and intriguing way. We both loved the script and were really taken by it. And as soon as they got the green light to go into production, we ramped up and put the thing together. But ultimately, it was because Josh and Julie are not just colleagues, not just people we'd worked with, but just people we really enjoyed working with on set, and they have become very good friends of ours. And it's really nice to be able to help and support really good people who have a creative vision, but aside from just being incredibly talented, they're just really nice, great people, and we couldn't have been happier to be involved in the project. Can you share a little bit about the story and the themes of the film? Absolutely. Let me think. Where's best to start on this? It's kind of so Pickled Rabbit. Um, it's a really a it's the long and short of it is that Pickled Rabbit is essentially it's a metaphor for the story of immigrant children who will do what's necessary to win the approval of their parents, and this kind of takes it to that next level. So the main themes that are kind of explored in it is that idea of, like, what would you do to gain the approval of your mother in this case, and it turns out you would do quite a lot. And then there's this whole theme around the pickled rabbit itself, which is uh, uh, there's a mythology around this that ties itself to I believe the mid autumn a mid autumn festival that's based off a real Chinese myth, and so the god of the pickled rabbit, Bao Shen, is a creation. Um, that tells the story of this beautiful maiden who's imprisoned, I think, on a moon, separated from her husband for eternity, and then her only companion is this jade rabbit that pounds that has this sort of like elixir of life, I think. And then what happens is that there's this whole thing around a cup of mercury and moon motifs and so on, and that's where we've brought those into the film. And if you see some of the behind the scenes images of the film, you'll see how we've really incorporated all the mythology. But look up that mythology, and I think Julie could probably explain it better. Um, but yeah, what were some of the biggest challenges we faced, and were there any unexpected obstacles during filming, and how did we overcome them? So one of the big things, and I remember this uh, from when we were doing our scouting. So we were filming in January, and we needed to film inside of a church. And in order to get the really big effect of what we wanted to do with regards to like the moon effects and the idea of having this supernatural event happening, we really needed to make sure we were always filming in the actual church area at night. Now, unfortunately, the limitations that get put on that is that in order to shoot at night, we probably needed about 12 hours to film all the scenes involving the transformation and the arrival of of the the arrival to the altar and to the ceremony, and all of that had to be done at night. But it gets dark around 5 o'clock, and then we had a curfew with the city at 11 o'clock, which meant we had to have like everything, all the lights down and everything like that by 11 o'clock at night. So it really only gave us 5 to 6 hours of darkness to film in. And so what we had to do with the AD and with Julie and Josh and sort of just working this out with the DP is we had to divide the shooting upstairs into 2 nights and then film all the other stuff during the day. And normally on a film production, you don't want to keep moving back and forth. It would be in an ideal situation, you'd be able to just film everything upstairs and all the way through. And what we would have done is tried to get an extension on the curfew, maybe stay, even shoot throughout the night. But we realized the cost of getting that kind of an extension and the need to make sure that we had all the neighbors on board and everybody on board would have just been way too much. It just wouldn't have worked. So we had to settle for making sure that we were always finishing our shooting day before 11 o'clock, and we couldn't really start filming upstairs until after 5. Also, we had, and the church was really great about working with us, but we had a couple limitations in that there were groups that were in the church up until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and so in many cases we actually couldn't even start filming until about 1. So we had to kind of take 2 full days of filming, and we would always lose about an hour or 2 on either side in order to accommodate the church schedule as well. So that proved to be a bit of a challenge, but everything else was actually pretty smooth for the most part. I mean, we had some small, technical things, but nothing that was out of the ordinary. You'd have things where like, we have these remote video transmitters so that you can send signals from the camera to other monitors and stuff. And some of them weren't working, and cables weren't working all the time. But other than that, it was just stuff we had to kind of sort out and replace items and so on, which essentially became um, Helena and myself, and Helena and I were producing as well on this, and we had to just do a whole lot of driving and picking up while the production was going on. So for us, we wound up spending maybe half of our time in the car and half of our time on set. These are questions that are coming in that came in from email to me earlier. So if anybody who's on live wants to ask a question, feel free to. But otherwise, I'll just answer the questions that have come in so far. Um, How did we find our crew and cast for the film? This, I have to say, was so the question is, how did we go about bringing in our cast and our crew for the film? Um, the cast and the crew, largely, the casting was all done by Julie and Josh, and they found our three actors. So that was Lillian Lim and Kristen and Ryan, and they are all fantastic, and they're all like, always working. And you when you see, if you take a look at their credits, there's a show that they've been in that you've watched. And so they put those people together, and a lot of the other crew were all friends of Josh and Julie that they had worked with on other productions. And um, and then we had some friends as well who helped out with things like locations and things like that. But the great thing about working in the film industry, and this is the thing that I say for, if you want to start and do your own stuff and you're here in Vancouver, it's like the more crews you get to work with out in the quote unquote real world, the and the more likely you are to be able to find people you want to work with for when you get to your own projects. Um, when oftentimes I'm talking with people outside of Vancouver or outside the industry, and they're like, "Oh, I just can't find the right crew." I'm like, I can throw a stone and hit the crew that I want in in a day. Oh, question here. What did you learn on this production? What did I learn on this production? Um, really learned the I've production managed another short film before, and I production managed a feature. And then on this one, um, let's see, what did I learn? Um, what did I learn on this one? I'm trying to think. I'll come back to that answer. Oh, it's a good challenge. What did I learn on this production? I really had to kind of work on the other films that I've worked on. I have had I've been the one kind of in charge of the money, but not really having charge of the money. And this is the first time where I've been on a production where not only was I managing the spending of the money, but I also, like, I had direct access to the bank account, so I knew what we had and what we didn't have at any given moment. And so more than any other production I've ever worked on as a production manager, I was really dialed into, like, every penny we were spending. Like, on any given day, you could have asked, "Did you have a um, did you have any, or do we have money for this?" Or, "Oh, we broke this thing's going to cost us $100." And I was like, it was to that point where I was like, "Oh, I know exactly where that puts us in the budget at this moment." And when we were getting close to our limit, and when we had to pull back. Um, I mean, the other thing I wouldn't say I learned, but it just reinforced that there's certain values and things, and certain things you don't compromise on. I think that prep is super important, and I'm always saying that prep is important. The more time you spend in pre-production on a film, even a short film, even if you're only going to be filming for 3 days, there's just so many things you can deal with in pre-production that if you that can take some of the stress off of production in a massive way. Um, you learn that the one good thing I really picked up and learned on this one was how willing people are to help out, especially just if the resources are available, people are always willing to help out. Um, Reinforcing the idea that food is just always number one and paramount on any production. And we had really good caterers on this show, which who we've worked with before, but they were just top notch and kept the crew really, really happy the whole time. And one of the big things was, when you have to limit some of the crew size, because for money purposes, we didn't have the money to hire probably as many crew members as we would have liked to. But when you see that, that means that you become responsible for, if you don't have the role, then the producer becomes the producers become the people who have to take on those roles. And so that's why we were out driving a lot. Um, yeah. Anything else? Other questions? What would you say was the most important thing to have when working on a film set? A most important thing to have when working on a film set. I mean, aside from the funny answer and obvious answer, which would be you need a camera and you need a sound team, or at least you need a camera. Um, I would say that you need to one thing that people don't think about, I think that this is super important, is you need to have really good working walkie-talkies. Walkie-talkies are like, and this is the assistant director in me, but I always think to myself, you know, you can never, when everybody has working walkie-talkies, sets are very quiet and very easy, and they work really well together. Um, and then I think there's also just one of the just from a general sense, I would say the most important thing you need to have on a film set is you just need to have a cohesive working relationship between the producers, the director of photography, and the AD team, because essentially, um, those are the people who are, for the most part, those are the people who are in needing to work together to make sure that the day gets spent properly. The production design team usually is in there, but they have usually done a lot of the work ahead of time, and oftentimes when we are in a timing situation, the production designers, generally speaking, have already like they're just top dressing, they're just figuring things out in that moment. But it's really important to just have a really good working relationship amongst the entire team, um, and a working phone. Let's see. Any other questions right now? I'm just reading through the list of the ones that I got. Current status of the post-production process. So we've got a rough cut, and we've got a rough cut, and we have our visual effects and our colorists kind of standing by for after this whole production is done. Or this whole crowdfunding thing is done. And once it's done, we will be able to get going on the visual effects and the sound design. And once we get those, and sound design, I would add to that music. So once we get all of the visual effects, the sound design, the music done, those might happen a little bit more simultaneously with each other. And then we do have a final finishing of color correction that we have to do. So basically, we've got the edit done. Uh, and that's kind of the where things are right now. We kind of know what we need to do for visual effects. Sound design hasn't really started yet, and hasn't really got um, that part we haven't talked about yet. And then we haven't gotten into coloring yet. What was the biggest challenge on this production? The biggest challenge on this production, I would say, it was a very ambitious production, and I think we had high expectations, but not the just like lots of films, high expectations, but not the money to accomplish them. Um, and that meant we weren't able to really have people working in prep the way that I think we would have wanted to. I think that if we had been able to get, um, you know, if we'd been able to pay people more during pre-production to be able to be more ready, I think that would have helped. But ultimately, in the end, we got all the shots we needed. So, but in the end, what we also had to do was, because of that, we had to kind of dip a little bit into our post-production budget, which is kind of where we're at right now, in order to finish the production side of the film. Um, mhm. Let's see. What festivals will we be applying to? Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I mean, I think right now the timing all comes down to when can we get this thing finished. So that's the hard part. The hard answer to that is that, you know, it's when can we get it finished, and that would help us figure out what festivals we want to target, because I don't know if for those of you who don't necessarily know how it works is that there are certain film festivals, like some of the bigger ones, like you might have heard of Sundance, you might have heard of South by Southwest, and there's sort of like that the top tier film festivals that are out there. They are usually the ones that everybody targets, and they're usually the ones that have the huge biggest competition. But they also one of the things they have is that they have they ask for a premier status for the most part. So that means that you can't show your film at any other festival before you show it there. So you have to kind of put your eggs in that basket of hoping that you get into one of those, and then kind of hedging against having some of these more genre specific film festivals that you really want to go to that probably actually are going to be even more even more valuable in the long run because your audience is going to go there. So this is a horror film. There's some really good horror film festivals that are out there. One of the ones that is actually in Canada here, and it's in Montreal, is Fantasia Film Festival, I think, and they are like world known for being a place to go for to bring horror films and horror short films too. And I think we definitely would want to get into that one. And it's really it's a matter of trying to line up the festival applications with the completion of the film, and then trying to time it so that we can have like that sort of 6 to 12 month run of hitting some film festivals, and then picking the ones we want to travel to. I know that for Josh and Julie, because they have a lot of family and friends and stuff from the Ottawa region. I know they want to make sure that we do get an East Coast film festival as well. So I would say like East Coast, West Coast, sort of like Vancouver area, East Coast of Canada slash northeastern United States, and then because there's an Asian market for the film, we think that there's a lot of opportunities to get into film festivals in Asia. Let's see. It's a question of what's next for me after this short film. Any upcoming projects? One of the yeah, well, I mean, yes. To short answer is yes. We are producing a Canadian spy movie called The Quiet Canadians. Um, and aside from and that's something we are also putting together right now. We've got the script. We're raising funding for that, and we are in line. We still do assistant directing, uh, and then we are looking to produce more projects, quite a few more projects if we can. Um, we've got another short film that we are producing that's called Unfraid, which is a western, and that one we are trying to get into production in September. And then there's a film we are ADing on that is supposed to go in October. And other than that, it's Quiet Canadians. We have another film called Shingar that is, or Shinger that is that Helena wrote as a script that we are going to be trying to develop as well. That hopefully we can develop and get off the ground for after Quiet Canadians. And lots of things on the go. Good question. With any story involving cross-cultural themes, can you share your general thoughts or experiences on producing multilingual projects compared to English only? Um, this was an English language script for multilingual. I've worked on another movie where we did have we had Cantonese and Mandarin that was being spoken, um, and we've had we usually have consultants who come in to help with the language and make sure that, especially with regards to making sure we're getting the pronunciations right. We always bring those in. to make sure that that's taken care of. And usually, anytime there's any themes that are involved that involve multicultural themes that I don't understand or might not be familiar with, it's usually coming from like the writers usually got a good familiarity with it, or we've brought in a consultant. In this case, we have like Julie and Josh both have like a really good sense of what the mythology is for the film. I'm trying to think if I've worked on any films that were in another language more predominantly. I haven't worked on any that are actually in another language other than English. The the standard of making a film is pretty universal. It's kind of fun because you work with people from different backgrounds in different countries and so on. And while some of the mechanisms are a little bit different, it's sort of there's still a basic language, film language, and so on to making the film, to putting the film together. And then it just comes down to work expectations. Certain countries have different ways of working, and like different hours requirements, different like expectations regarding days in a row and things like that. And that's more the you sort of have to fit within that little um, fit your plan within everybody's paradigm of whatever country you're in and so on. But ultimately, the idea in the language is pretty universal, which is why oftentimes you have um, influences coming in from overseas to Western films because the films themselves, like some of these really great films from China or from Japan and India and so on, the films themselves are constructed very or are tell the story in a very similar way that you would expect from a Western film. It's just how the mechanism, like the way the crews work and so on, that tends to change. Did that answer your question? Question that came in: how do you see your role evolving in future projects? More production management, producing, or perhaps directing? I mean, yes to all three. I see myself as a. This is not meant to be. It's not to be pretentious at all, but it probably will come across as pretentious. I don't see myself as like doing one thing. Like someone asked a director I once asked me like, where do you see yourself going? And this is when he was hiring me as an assistant director for his film, and I was talking about, well, I want to produce, I want to direct, and so on. And he said, no, pick a lane, be a really good assistant director. And if you're a really good assistant director, you'll get work, and you just do that for your whole life, and you'll get work. And I thought, yeah, okay, that makes sense from a career standpoint, but from a creative standpoint, I'm far more drawn to that sort of multi hyphenated position where it's like producer, writer, director, or production manager, producer, or something like that, where you're carrying different hats. What I really have enjoyed lately is this idea that I've been an assistant director for over a decade, and um, I feel like my experiences working on such a variety of different sets, like different genres, different budget levels, and so on, have made it made it so that I really want to do more than just being assistant director only. But I love assistant directing. I love the vibe of working as an assistant director on set. But I also love getting into production management. This is production management is something I've only been doing now for the last I guess almost a year now, where I've worked on two shorts and one feature, and I'm continuing to get more and more work on those kinds of films. And I'm really enjoying production managing. Like I just love, it's kind of like taking the AD experiences and being able to expand on that and really focus on problem solving on a different level. And I like being a leader and taking leadership roles on a film set. And I like solving bigger problems, and trying to manage people. And I think as I do more and more of that, I'll improve my ability. I always think of production managing and producing is really about managing people, and that doesn't mean managing, like, getting them to do what you want. It's about just really keeping crew morale up, making sure that the crew know that you know, that, the crew are not are able to are given the opportunity to do their work in the best way possible, and I think that's the role of the producer. The producer's role is to try to make everybody's job better and more efficient within the constraints that you've been given. You know, you can't. We all have budgets. We all have money to work within, so you can only do so much. But your objective as a producer is always to get the best and the most out of your crew, and that takes a lot of leadership. And I don't think I'm ever going to be an expert on leadership, but it's definitely something that I'm excited about. I've always loved leading teams and leading groups and trying to be in the kind of position where I can help others succeed and help others excel and give other people the opportunity to shine and be heroes. And a film set's a great example of where that can happen, because actors, directors, crew, everybody has an opportunity to shine on any given day, and to be a part of to be a significant part of the production. And when you give everybody that opportunity, you get gold, and you get, like, filmmaking magic. Um, any other questions here? I've seen questions from two different people, but I see there's a third one on there. So I don't know if you have any questions, whoever mystery person you are. There's one more question that I have from email from earlier. How do you balance a creative vision with practical strengths like budget and time? And I mean, this is the ultimate movie making question. Um, you're you're always managing creative with budgets and time and budget are basically time, budget, and your creative vision are all kind of part of a balancing act, where you can't have a project that is so ambitious that the budget and the time can't keep up with it, and vice versa. You can't have such a low budget that it can't execute the film that you're trying to make. So you're often there's a delicate balance, and I tend to step away from when people say, "Oh, let's make that. We have $2 million, and let's make a movie for $2 million," without looking at what kind of a movie you can make for $2 million or for $100,000. We made our first feature for I mean, realistically, it was under 200,000 in the end. I mean, we got post-production help from Telefilm, but in the end, it was about a $200,000 or under movie. And we just learned how to manage resources and make it work the best way we could with the resources that we had, and we didn't make excuses for it. And I think that's the one thing you have to do on a movie production is you can't make the excuse of, well, we don't have enough money, because nobody ever has enough money, and you can't make the excuse that, well, we ran out of time, because nobody ever has enough time. And if you go in with a movie idea and a script that can be executed and done for the money that you have available to you, then the movie will turn out well. If you have a movie that's far too ambitious for the money you have, and you don't plan accordingly, and you don't try to make it so that it can work within the budget, then you will be disappointed with the result. And it's one of those things where you can almost have something that's too ambitious. It's a film project that's too ambitious for the money you have, will not look the way that you wanted it to look. Whereas and will not turn out the way you wanted it to turn out, because you just won't have the money to do what. If you wanted to make a superhero movie and you want to make it just like other superhero movies, unless you have $100 million, you're not going to do that. You can't make a James Bond movie for the nowadays. You can't make a James Bond movie for the same cost that you made a James Bond movie in 1962. 1962, they made a James Bond movie for $1 million, which even at that time was a low budget film. But nowadays they're over $100 million. So all of these movie projects. I mean, one movie you could make that was a great hit and that turned out really well was a movie like a Star Trek 2. If you're into like genre films, Star Trek 2 was like a very low budget movie, but it was executed so well. But if you look at it, it's essentially William Shatner and Ricardo Montalban, who are the two adversaries in this film, never have a scene together in the movie, and most of the movie takes place on the bridge of the Enterprise or the bridge of the other ship, and that's the whole movie. The whole movie takes place in two locations with a couple of other little bits thrown in, and that for me is the ultimate example of making a great story that was done for at that time a very low budget. It was a budget that was I remember it was cut quite a lot. Anyway, that's an aside, but you can do a lot. You can make genre films for low budget if you are creative with the kind of approach you're going to take to the genre film. Like you could make a superhero movie for micro budget level if you changed the way that the superhero movie was going to be made. Like if you think about it, the Joker is a superhero movie that's made. Um, that could have been made with. I mean, if you took out all the polish, that could have been made for far less money probably. But it's still a superhero movie. But it's an origin story for a superhero movie. Okay. I kind of got no more questions from before. Does anybody else have any more questions? Do me a favor if you're on live right now, or if you're watching this replay before June the 15th, I think, before June the 15th, go to Seed and Spark /fun /pickled rabbit. Um, and donate there. Oh, the question: do you still have the rabbit? Yes, we do still have the rabbit. I believe it's sitting at the special effects house, and it is still around. I think there's some talk about having it make a few appearances sometime in the future in public. But it exists, and it is hanging out with our special effects person. Will you be keeping it for a feature? More than I imagine that we would. Um, Hopefully, the feature they'll make a couple more, but it turned out really well. I mean, I have to say that the 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 rabbit, if you will, this sort of like monster rabbit, is it turns out it looks so good. There's some photos I know we've put some photos up of the rabbit, kind of still photos up, and it just looks so good. Our team Emerson and his artistics ability. You gotta hire that guy for if you ever need to make a monster. Hire that guy. He's amazing. But we'll have to ask Julie and Josh if there's going to be a feature. So that's the thing. I know that there's talk about it, but it's their creative brain that's gonna turn this into a feature. I think it absolutely this short film is built to have a feature around it. And the great thing about it though is that as a short film, as the film itself, it can stand on its own. It doesn't need any help. It doesn't need to be like a proof of concept for a feature, but the feature version of this, I think, would be an amazing film. And I have to say, like, I realize I'm going to come across as super biased, but watching even just the rough cut, and the rough cut didn't have everything in it that it's going to have when we get through it. But the rough cut was really one of the best short films I've ever worked on and ever seen. So I think it's gonna be amazing. It is creepy and freaky and scary and lovely in all the right ways. If that's not a good plug for the film, then I don't know what is. But hats off to Josh and Julie for writing such a really amazing story and making a executing it well. Like it's one thing to write a story, but it's one thing to write a good script. It's another thing to execute it well. And both of them just like they're never, it's amazing to see that done so well. and so methodically too. Like one of the things working with, um, I mean, working with them on set, these two creative people, and Julie taking the reins as the director and really making hard choices, hard decisions, but being collaborative and getting them. A good the mark of a good director is the ability to be collaborative, but also to know what you're looking for and be able to communicate that properly to the people around you. Like there wasn't really a doubt most of the time when we were there that we had the right shot that we needed for the movie, or that we had the right elements in place, and the right production design. And there's so much that goes into creating an environment where a movie like this can work. So, a lot of stuff you won't ever see. Like there's photos of those, and that's hats off to the production design team too. But and which really speaks to the point of it taking a village. But there's stuff that was in on the set, that in the background, and stuff that you probably won't even see in the movie. But when you're there and you go, oh wow, we are in an environment here that is special. That is really like it is taking us to it's putting us in the world of our myth, and that's executed brilliantly by the production design team. Tiana and her team, again, hire Tiana, and Tiana and Jason and their team that worked just so amazingly on making sure the production design worked. But that also comes from having a really solid director's vision that is well communicated from the beginning to the end. And the only way you get what you want as a director is if you communicate that with your team properly. And that's a skill. That's not something that just gets. You can't just assume that everybody's going to see your vision and just be able to follow along. And you can't get upset when people do. I always think when the set design, or when the shots aren't right, or when things are wrong on set, it's you got to look at how is that communicated from the top. And that's a skill you have to develop, and you have to learn, you have to get practice on. But I think Julie, as the director, really um, really was able to shine on this. And I think with the story, with her and Josh collaborating together on the story really is elevated by the movie itself. Like the story was good, but the movie elevates the story. The movie makes the story even better. It's like you can make a great script really great. You can't make a bad script good, but you can make a great script really great. And that's where they came in. So if I haven't sung their praises enough, I mean, I think they're gonna if it isn't Pickled Rabbit, it's gonna be something else. But Pickled Rabbit, I think, is gonna give them something to work with in a bigger project in the future. I think it also comes from. This is one thing I will say is that as a director, working other jobs in a movie set is, I think, it should be like a requirement to be a director. So like Julie's a script supervisor. Josh was a script supervisor. And for those who don't know, script supervisor essentially holds the story of the film in their brain, um, to fill in the gaps for the director, to help fill in the gaps for the director, to make sure the director doesn't lose sight of things. The director's often got about a billion things on their brain, and the script supervisor can focus on just the story, and can focus on making sure the story is executed properly, and making sure that the shots we need are there for the edit in the right way, and that when you need to make a decision about losing a shot, that you have the script supervisor can inform whether or not that's going to work or not. Like, oh, you're going to need this later, so you may have to make sure you get it. And that's only um, that comes from, the script supervisor is an invaluable tool on a movie set. And I would, anytime I see a show where they don't want to have one, I'm like, you're going to want one. Even if they say, oh, I'm going to edit it myself, it's like, well, yeah, but you might not have what you need to edit it without having your script supervisor there. And so both of them are script supervisors. So they know the story's going to work, and they know how the story's going to, um, eh, how it needs to play out. And even if there needs to be a variation or a plan B, they know how a plan B could work if necessary, if needed. And I think that if you wanna be a director on a movie set, like, the more jobs you can take that are not directing jobs, the better prepared you are. Like, knowing how even just if you worked in lighting, if you worked in a grip department, you worked in, any department, and you have an understanding art direction, you learn how the sausage is made so that when you are a director, you know what you can get away with and what you can't get away with. And I would say that anybody who wants to be a director, you should work in other jobs first. Work in as many of them as possible. You don't have to become an expert in any of them, but make sure you get time on set in as many other roles as you possibly can, so that you gain an understanding of how it's done. You know, a captain doesn't need to know how the battleship moves or how the cruiser moves, but the captain should have an understanding of what they can do, how far they can push a battleship and how far they can push the crew, and what expectations they can get out of out of the vessel that they have. And that only comes from just having that understanding. So I'm rambling. So if anybody has any other questions, please throw them in there. All right. I'm going to call it. It's almost an hour. Seedandspark.com/fun/pickled dash rabbit. There'll be a link in the description. If you are checking it out after the campaign is closed, you can certainly follow the movie and see where it's going to end up in festivals. But definitely go there before the campaign closes, and if you want to throw a couple of bucks our way to get the post production finished, we will be more than grateful. This is the first time I've ever done a live stream, so I am going to watch this with dread later and see how I can improve it, and maybe we'll do more of these in the future. Ciao for now. Have a great evening.